Hey everybody, welcome to day 23 of our iLearn days. Today we are going to be talking about the literary terms that are going to be associated with the epic or the epic poem, which is what the Odyssey is. Okay, the Odyssey is an epic poem, which we talked briefly about last time, and these are the terms that we'll be using when we have our discussions. So just a quick reminder, for each day of reading, you have questions that are due, and they're marked in the text as you read. If you do not want to do those questions, or you just miss class discussion, I'm going to be holding live discussions for an hour each day that we have readings due, and I'll make a schedule and remind text that out Monday. And if you come to that session and you participate, either in the chat on the side or verbally, I will give you credit. You don't have to answer those questions for the text. Okay, that will be your grade for the day. So just keep that in mind, and we'll be using these terms to discuss. So these are your Quizlet terms, and we're going to look at each one here in a moment. They're on Quizlet, and that is linked on Classroom, and they're on your assignment for day 23. Okay, so you should have all of that together. If it's not on Classroom or you have trouble finding it on my Quizlet, let me know. I'd be happy to shoot you a link. Okay. The assignment for these are that you will read each definition. Then you're either going to write a sentence, and that sentence should use the word to show me that you understand it, or you're going to write a question explaining to me what you don't understand in the definition of that word in a question, and we're going to look at some examples of that. So you have, here some words. The antagonist. Okay, I know what an antagonist is. We've talked about this in fiction. So the antagonist in SpongeBob SquarePants is Plankton, and this shows me, hey, this person understands that the antagonist is the bad guy. Okay, they've got it. In medias res, in the middle of things. What does it mean when it says it begins in the middle of things? This shows me that the definition is unclear and you're not sure what that part of the definition means. Okay, and that's kind of how this is going to function. And you will write either one statement like this, or one question, okay? So not one of each. So you should only turn in 20 things. One question or one statement for each word, okay? So let's come over here and look at some individual definitions. Okay, antagonist. You guys know what antagonist is. We've talked about this before. It is a character or force that is in conflict with the main character, okay? So it's like, this is the bad guy. And that bad guy may be a person, it may be a tornado, it may be a general sense of unease. If the current state of the world was fictional right now, the antagonist would be COVID-19, right? It is the thing that is against the protagonist, all of us, okay? Next we have archetype. We talked about this briefly. An archetype is a type of character, detail, image, or situation that appears in literature from around the world and throughout history. And this is kind of an important thing to note about it. Some critics believe that archetypes reveal deep truths about human experiences. So some critics think that archetypes are talking about deeper, more substantial, more important truths about humanity and not just about a character in and of itself. Stereotypes are also based on archetypes. So if you can think of like a stereotypical person, like think like, oh, if you think of a crazy cat lady, and I only say that because again my cat is with me today to do this, you could probably all list some similar qualities. Well, that's based on some kind of archetype, okay? They're different in that archetypes are typically neutral and stereotypes are typically negative, okay? We want to stick with archetypes, not stereotypes. Next we have dactylic hexameter. So you guys remember iambic pentameter, right? Iambic pentameter had 10 syllables with 2 feet per syllable, right? Well, each of these lines has 6 metrical feet. The first 5 feet may be made up of either dactyls or spondees, which we're going to talk about in a minute. However, a line is composed, the last metrical foot is usually a spondee. And we're going to look at dactyls and spondees, okay? So let's look at dactyl first. A dactyl is a long syllable followed by 2 short syllables. So remember in iambic pentameter, an iamb, or 1 foot, was 2 stressed and then unstressed, right? In this case, a dactyl is 1 long syllable followed by 2 short, or 1 stressed followed by 2 unstressed, okay? So this is the long, and this is short, short. Do you need to know this right now? No. A spondee, let's go ahead and, oh my gosh, just zoom in. There we go. Is a foot consisting of 2 long or stressed syllables. Okay, so this is stressed, stressed. So when it says short, it means unstressed. So if dactylic hexameter is 6 metrical feet, then you could mark it off like this, okay? 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, okay? And within each foot, it's either made up of dactyls or spondees. However, the last metrical foot usually is a spondee. So if the beat, is long, then we're going to put our long sound over it, okay? And then the shorts will be U's. So if this is long, long, dactyls typically are a long, oops, sorry about that, a long beat, short, short. So imagine this, and then you have 2 long syllables. So see, it looks different than iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter looks like this. Da da, da da, da da, da da, da da. This one will be da 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 da. So it has a different feel to it, okay? And all this is to say that in epic poetry, the rhythm is going to be different than it was for Shakespeare, okay? Do you need to know this? Do you need to memorize dactyls and spondees? No, but we'll talk about it briefly, and we'll be able to hear and feel the difference in the rhythm and the meter of this text versus Shakespeare. Okay, moving on. The epic. Okay, the epic is a long narrative poem written in heightened language. So just like Shakespeare, that language is going to be really like elevated and beatific. It's not going to be plain spoken. Which recounts the deeds of a heroic character who embodies. How did that happen? I'm learning all kinds of stuff on this. Like, oh, that's what it is. Of a heroic character who embodies the values of a particular society. So Odysseus is our character, right? So he's going to be the one that we follow on our epic journey. That epic hero is here. A main character in an epic poem, Odysseus. Larger than life, part of a dangerous adventure. We talked about this on a previous slide, okay? So the epic is the poem itself, and the epic hero is kind of who we're going to follow. Next, we have an epic simile. So you guys know what a simile is. You guys have proven to me over and over and over and over and over that you know what a simile is, right? It's comparing 2 things using like or as. Correct? Correct. I was waiting so that you guys could fill it in, like on those kids shows where they're like, what do you think, kids? Right, you said this. So I was giving you that chance. Epic simile. So this is a simile developed over several lines of verse, especially one used in an epic poem. So what this means is it's going to be a comparison, but it's also going to be over many, 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 many lines of verse. It's not going to be something that happens in a single line. It's not going to be something that you see really quickly. Now, a simile uses like or as. You're not going to see the words like and as over and over and over, but you're going to see like maybe this, here are 12 lines, this, like, and then some more lines. You also may not see this word because it's in an older type of language, but basically it's a long comparison, okay? And we'll try to find some as we read, and if we don't, we don't. Epithet. You guys had to create your own epithet for one of your assignments so far. It's a term used to point out a characteristic of a person. Homeric epithets are often compound adjectives. Swift-footed Achilles. This tells us that Achilles was fast, right? And that's like his defining characteristic in this. They become an almost formulaic part of a name. They can be abusive or offensive, so they can be used to like put down a character, but don't have to be. Athletes often have epithets. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, The Rock would be an epithet. I'm not good at sports, but I'm sure there are athletes that have like nicknames like the Rocket, or something like that. That would be an epithet. It's a descriptor that tells you about the person. A flashback is a device or technique used by an author to present information about what has happened prior to the opening of the story. You guys know what flashbacks are. It's like in a movie when they're like, remember that one time? And then it fades to an older scene. That's a flashback. Historical and cultural context. This is the backdrop of details of the time and place in which the work is set or in which it was written. So let's say hypothetically that I were to write a story right now. I were to sit down and write a story about a pandemic. Okay? I write a book. It's about a small Kentucky town in which a global pandemic has come through and everyone's in quarantine and the characters' experiences during that time. But it's fiction. It's all made up. None of it's real. In 100 years, if someone picks up that book, they would want to look at the historical and cultural context of what was happening when it was written to see how much of this is true and how much of it is made up, right? It also gives insight as to why I might write this story. So we look at Homer, we look at the Trojan War, we look at the Iliad, to kind of get some of that cultural context of what we're reading, and it helps us understand where the writer is coming from. Okay, Homer. Not really a literary term, but we're going to roll with it. Homer was an ancient Greek epic poet, who is believed to have written the Iliad and the Odyssey. So do we know for sure? No. Does it matter? It does not. Hubris. This is an important word. If you don't know this word, you need to know this word. It means excessive pride, okay? So if a character has hubris, they have excessive pride. They're not just proud, it's excessive. It ends up becoming a fatal flaw. And that's important to know, okay? I'm not going to say that Odysseus has hubris, but I'm also not going to say that he doesn't. Let's see. And medias res, in the middle of things. This is one that I feel like people are going to get hung up on. I hope not. Basically, this is where you have your timeline of your story, okay? Here's my story, okay? Here's the beginning, here's the end. In medias res, the narrator is going to drop in, and this is where they're going to start. Then they're going to jump back, and then they're going to tell the story to the end. And sometimes they even make a couple of curlicue stops where they go back and forward and back and forward. That's all this is. It's a fancy term for telling the story in a flashback. Okay? A myth. A fictional tale, myths are never true, that describe the actions of gods and heroes, or explain the causes of natural phenomena. If you are in my mythology class, or you were last trimester, or you've taken Miss Kane's class, you should know what this is, right? Especially the fact that it explains something or it tells about people. Unlike legends, myths emphasize supernatural rather than historical elements. So a legend typically is based in reality. Myths don't have to be. Like if I were to say, hey, write a myth about why dogwoods are pink and white, you could come up with anything. You could say, well, one day the goddess or the god Buddy the cat, again, my cat is sitting with me and he's glorious. The god Buddy the cat was walking and stubbed his toe, and he got really mad and scratched someone, and they bled, and it mixed with the white flowers of a dogwood tree, turning it pink. I'm only saying this because Buddy would never scratch anyone, so I'm trying to imagine him as this big, powerful force. Really, he's just kind of a fat cat. That's very sweet. Anyway, that could be a myth, right? It emphasizes the supernatural. His magical blood or his magical cat claws caused the tree to absorb the color, giving it that color forever. But it explains something, right? Myths explain something. They give a reason. Mythology, on the other hand, is the body of stories. So if I were to say the mythology of Buddy, it would be all the stories associated with this god, Buddy the cat. And it's about gods and heroes that try to explain how the world works. If you're not in my mythology class, you should look up why we have seasons. So you should look up seasons and Persephone and Hades. That's my favorite one. It's a good one. It's super weird. You'll love it. Okay, an Odyssey is a long, adventurous journey with many stops and trials along the way. Stops and trials. An Odyssey is not a leisurely trip, right? It is a trip that will test you and that is difficult. And we are going to read the Odyssey, so you can imagine how much fun that's going to be. Oral tradition. This one kind of explains itself. It's literature passed down by word of mouth. So like if your grandparents have ever told you a story, well, let me tell you a story about my dad or about my grandparents or about whatever. That's an oral tradition. My grandpa, before he died years ago, told us the story about how he was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed during World War II. He was up in the mountains delivering supplies to some storage facilities, and he watched the planes come in, and he watched them get bombed. That's not written down anywhere, except my dad has written it down now, but it was orally passed down to us, so it's part of an oral tradition. The Odyssey was written as an oral story. It wasn't written on paper. It was written, they just would tell the story, and then the next person would tell it, and the next person would tell it. So you can imagine how much it's changed over the years. Okay, protagonist. We talk about antagonists. Now we have a protagonist. It's the main character in a literary work. The main character of our story is Odysseus, which is what the Odyssey was named for. And then universal theme. We've talked about this one briefly as well. A message about life that can be understood by most cultures and usually even in different time periods. So it's like if I tell a story and my specific themes are only relevant to, a very small population. The universal theme would be something that was more broad, like love, good versus evil, homecoming, things like that. Things that are broad enough and big enough that a whole range of people could understand, regardless of their own background. So, again, not sure why that keeps happening. For your assignment, what you're going to do, where is it? There it is you are going to look at each term, okay? All of them. You're going to look at all of these terms, and you're going to write either a statement or a question to show me that you either understand or don't understand this phrase. So that way I kind of have a heads up going into our discussions that let me know, hey, when I talk about archetypes, I need to explain that further. Or when I talk about hubris, I need to explain that further. Or I don't need to go over mythologies and myths over and over and what that means because they all get it. Okay? So please do that. I'll send out a schedule for in-person discussions, and I think those start Tuesday. I'll reference the schedule. I think those start on day 24, but I'll double check. If you guys have any questions, you can text me, email me, whatever. I miss you guys. I hope you're having a good time at home. I know it's starting to get a little bit stir crazy. It is here too, but I'm here if you need me.